Okay, John wants to purchase a home for $875,000, but wants to finance, meaning borrow the maximum while avoiding mortgage insurance. In order to avoid mortgage insurance, you typically need to put down at least 20%. So $875,000 times 0.2 comes out to $175,000. To figure out how much I'll finance, I can either take this minus this and get $700,000, or you could have done $875,000 times 0.8. Either one will get you that number. The monthly payment is going to be the amount that you borrow times our rate, 0.04625, divided by 12, to the negative 12 times, now be careful, this is a 25-year loan. Often it's 30, but in this particular case it was 25. And after rounding that number off to the nearest cent, you're going to get 39.4066. To figure out how much interest you pay off over the life of the loan, you just take that amount from your calculator, the 3940.66 with all the decimals after it, and you multiply it by 12 months a year for, in this case, 25 years, and you subtract out the amount that you borrowed, and you're going to get $482,197.67 paid in interest. All right, John's going to purchase a home for this amount, but plans to put 25% down. He plans to finance the balance at that rate on a 25-year fixed. The closing costs are 2%. So find the total down payment, including the closing costs. So let's figure out the down payment before the closing costs. And to do that, we're going to go $725,000 that we're going to buy the house for, times 25% is $181,000. That looks like a negative, but it's an equals 250. Okay, now to figure out the amount that you finance, you're going to take that and multiply by 0.75, and this is going to be $543,750. To calculate, we did this because we need to know what the closing costs are going to cost. This 2% is based off of what you borrow, so the closing costs are $543,750 times 0.02, that's 2%, and this is $10,875. So the total final down payment is our $181,250 plus our $10,875, which brings us to our total $192,125. To calculate the monthly payment, we have to take the amount that we borrowed, which is the $543,000, and figure out the payment based off of that. So the payment is going to be $543,750 times our rate, which was 4.75. And again, this is a 25-year loan, so be careful. Make sure you read that and just don't automatically put 30 there, although 30 is the most common. Anyway, after rounding off to the nearest penny, this is going to come out to $3,100.01. Okay, John decides to buy 3.5 discount points, and in return, he'll get his rate lowered by that amount. So how much do the points cost? Well, remember, you only pay points on what you borrow. So the points are going to cost $543,750 times 3.5%. And that's going to come out to $19,031.25. If John buys and finances, meaning borrows those points, calculate the new monthly payment. So first of all, he's going to borrow a new amount. He's going to borrow the old amount, which was $543,750 plus the cost of the points. So the new amount borrowed is $562,781.25. The new rate, the old rate was 4.75%, but we're going to take away 0.75%, and the new rate is going to be 4%. So the payment is going to be what John borrowed, the $562,781.25 times our new rate of 0.04 or 4%. And again, this is a 25-year loan. And after calculating this and rounding off to the nearest penny, we're going to get 2970.57. How long will it take to pay off these points? Well, let's take the amount that the points cost. That was at $19,031.25, and we're going to divide by the savings per month. And the savings per month we get by subtracting the two amounts. In other words, we get the savings per month by subtracting this and this. So the difference between those two payments was $129.44. And this comes out to 147.027 months, because this is the dollar amount, this is the savings per month. So it comes out to that number of months. So what we'll do is then we'll divide this by 12, because 12 months in a year, and we're going to get 12.25. So this 12 right here tells us that it's 12 years. Then I'm going to convert the remainder back into months. So there's a bunch of decimals that go on after this, but I'll subtract out the 12, and I'll have 0.25 with a bunch of decimals after it. To convert it back into months, I'll multiply this by 12, and I'll get 3.027. But payments only happen every month, so no matter how small this fractional part is, we have to round this up, and this will become 12 years and 4 months. Okay, John wants to purchase a home for that amount, but can only come up with a 5% down payment. So he plans to get a piggyback loan in this arrangement so that he can avoid mortgage insurance. He can get a 25-year fix at 4.5% on the 10-year loan, on the 25-year loan, and the 10-year will be at this rate. Okay, so let's calculate this. First of all, $950,000 times 0.8 will give us $760,000. That's how much he's going to borrow on the primary mortgage. We'll go 950,000 multiplied by 0.15, that's 15%, is 142,500. That's the amount that he's going to borrow on his piggyback loan. So the payment on the 25-year loan is going to be the amount that he borrowed times the rate on the 25-year loan, which was 4.5%. And again, this was a 25-year loan. And this is going to come out to, after rounding to the nearest penny, it's going to come out to 4,224.33. Now, the payment on the 10-year loan will be the amount that we borrowed, that we calculated that just a moment ago, times the rate on the 10 years, 4.125%. And this is going to come out, after rounding off to the nearest penny, 1451.22. And then to find the total payment, we add our two separate payments together, and we'll get a total payment of $5675.55. Okay, if you wanted to buy the same house as above, but did it through private mortgage insurance instead of a piggyback loan, what would the initial monthly payment be? And the private mortgage insurance is 1% in this case. So first, let's figure out what he needs to finance. Remember, he can only come in with 5%. So he's going to finance 95%. So 950,000 times 0.95, he's going to borrow $902,500. So his payment on this amount is going to be that $902,500 times, and this, we're going to use the what he can get on the original loan. So we're using 4.5% on a 25-year fixed. So 0.045 and this is going to come out to after rounding off to the nearest penny, this is going to come out to $5,016.39. Okay, now this is just the mortgage payment, but now we're going to have to pay the private mortgage insurance, the PMI, and the PMI is going to be based off of the amount that we borrow, $902,500 times, in this case, 1% divided by 12, and this is going to come out to $752.08 per month. And we'll take these two amounts and add them together to get an initial payment of $5,768.47. Okay, which method is more and by how much? Well, the PMI method is this amount. The piggyback loan is this amount. So the PMI method is more. By how much? Well, let's subtract the two. 5,768.47 minus 5,675.55 is going to come out the PMI is more by $92.92 per month. Okay, John needs to buy a home. He needs to finance this amount, and then he can either get a 30-year fixed at that rate or a 15-year fixed at that rate. Calculate the monthly payment for each and then figure out how much he's going to save he would save if he gets the 15-year loan, how much in interest. Okay, so let's do the 30-year first. Now remember, he's financing this, so don't multiply this by 20% or anything. That's the number we're using. So the payment for the 30-year loan is going to be the amount that he borrows times our rate, which in this case is 4.875%. And this was a 30-year fixed. So this, after rounding off to the nearest penny, is going to come out to $3783.84. Okay, the payment for the 15 is we're going to borrow the same amount of money, but this time we're borrowing at 4%. And again, make sure you put 15 there because it's a 15-year fixed. And after calculating this and rounding off to the nearest penny, we'll get 5288.77. Okay, to calculate the savings, let's calculate the amount of interest that we're going to pay on the 30-year loan. So if we take our payment amount, and remember, go back in your calculator and grab the number with all the decimals after it. Don't punch in that number there. So the interest on the 30-year loan is going to be that 3783.84 with all the decimals after it times 12 months per year for 30 years minus the amount that we borrowed. And this is going to come out to $647,181.97 after rounding off to the nearest penny. Then for the 15-year loan, we're going to take our 15-year payment, and again, grab that number from your calculator, 5288.77 with all the decimals after it, times 12 times 15 years minus the amount that we borrowed, is going to come out to $236,978.36. So the amount that we're going to be saving is the difference between these two amounts. So if I take these two amounts and subtract, we're going to get a total interest savings of $410,203.61. And again, this is what you're going to save in interest for the 15 versus the 30. Now, does that make the 15-year loan clearly better because we save so much in interest? And my suggestion is no. There's a lot of other compelling reasons why it's still in your financial best interest to get a 30-year fixed rather than a 15. We talked about that in the first two worksheets.